Minoka, would you please do me a favor and call the roll to see if we have a quorum? Here.
Governor Chopra?
Here.
Chair Colson?
Here.
Governor Lautenbach?
Here.
Governor Morphy? Here. And Governor West? You have a quorum.
So we have a quorum, and we're calling this meeting to order, please. I need an approval for the committee meeting minutes. We've had two that were in your packet, I believe, for the September 12th and the September 27th meetings that we did have. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of both September 12th and September 27th of strategic planning.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I was asked for a discussion. Sorry, I assumed that you, okay.
I think I pointed out one correction to Minoka. Incorporate that.
What was that?
Page 669 is not the
Oh, wow. I'm glad to see that people are really reading the minutes. We're enclosing them in our packets. Thank you. Oh, well, maybe he did. You never know. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you'll make a note of that, Minoka, in the minutes. So do we have a motion then with this little change in the minutes? Do I need to, again?
You could determine whether Governor Lautenbach will accept that amendment as the maker of the motion, and whether Chair Colson...
I will.
Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. We have a guest with us today, as Dean has mentioned, and so first of all, we want to say thank you so much for coming. So we're going to mix up a little bit because we're a little bit late in our agenda, and so we're going to start today with the Florida Center for Cybersecurity report. And, you know, this is very exciting for the state. Members of our committee, I guess you realize that there was language in the General Appropriation Act of 2013 which required that the Board of Governors submit a report no later than December 1st, 2013, so I guess you're working over Thanksgiving, Judy, to the legislature and the governor that provides a plan for the creation of a Florida Center for Cybersecurity at the University of South Florida. USF has taken the lead in drafting the report and the plan for the new center, and you've been working with the board staff. If funding by the 2014 legislature, USF will seek approval of the Florida Center for Cybersecurity as the State of Florida Center under Board Regulation 10.015. At this time, I'd like to call on either Judy, your provost, or our guest for a moment. Tell us how you want to proceed. Okay, Ralph, you're on.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Governor Frost. And I'd first like to extend my sincere appreciation to Dr. Ignash and her team, who have provided invaluable leadership and support in shaping the report you have before you. As you recognize, a report required by proviso language in the 2013 General Appropriations Act. This opportunity that has been presented to the Board of Governors could not be more timely. Just last week, in a statement before the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, Jim Comey, Director of the FBI, reminded the nation that, and I quote, "The diverse threats we face are increasingly cyber-based. Much of America's most sensitive data is stored on computers. We are losing data, money, and ideas through cyber intrusions. This threatens innovation, and as citizens, we are also increasingly vulnerable to losing our personal information. That is why we anticipate that in the future, resources devoted to cyber-based threats will equal or even eclipse the resources devoted to non-cyber-based terrorist threats. Members of the board, today the state of Florida and our university system are presented with an exciting yet tight window of opportunity to establish our position as the national leader in a rapidly burgeoning cybersecurity community. The Florida Center for Cybersecurity will work in partnership with education, business, and defense entities to meet the high demand for an exceptionally well-skilled workforce, to drive more R&D and business investment to Florida, and to provide assurance of personal and institutional data protection for those across our state and beyond. All this as we create new high-paid jobs and strengthen Florida's economic future, particularly in the defense, financial services, healthcare, transportation, and utilities sector. Through a higher education advisory council made up of representatives from each of the 12 state universities, we know that there is already good and widely distributed work underway across the state. The Florida Center for Cybersecurity envisions meeting the skyrocketing demand for high-paid, high-skilled employees in the field through coordination and expansion of these efforts from its hub at the University of South Florida, replicating in much the same way the valuable work of the Florida Small Business Development Center network that is headquartered at the University of West Florida and the Florida Institute of Oceanography, hosted by USF. The Tampa Bay region is already home to many of the state's largest financial, healthcare, and technology companies who, day in and day out, rely on a high-skilled workforce to assure protection of their clients' and patients' business and personal data. One of our leading collaborators will be the National Cyber Partnership based in Tampa. Moreover, as you know, our state is home to 21 military bases, from Pensacola to Jacksonville to Miami. And Florida is the chosen destination for tens of thousands of returning veterans, bringing with them the security clearances that position them so well for reintegration into the civilian cybersecurity workforce. Most important, three U.S. commands are located in Florida. Central Command and Special Operations Command at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, and Southern Command here in Miami. Today, we're extremely fortunate to be joined by the Commander of SOUTHCOM, General John F. Kelly, who will share his thoughts and address any questions you may have on the importance of the Florida Center to National Security and Defense. General Kelly.
Well, thanks very much. It's certainly a pleasure and honor to be here today. You'll probably figure by my accent, if you haven't already, that I'm not a native son of Florida, but I am a Florida resident, have been for 40 years. And all three of my children went to the university system, one to University of Florida and two to Florida State. So that always made for great discussions around Thanksgiving as to what team was better. I always, of course, took the side or endorsed the team of whoever I was talking to at the time, unless the three of them went together, and then I always went for Florida State because that's where my baby girl went. So I have to up front tell you that I can't endorse anything, so my comments today really are personal comments, and I've been told by my lawyer to stay pretty much close to the outline here so I don't get beyond that. But I can give you some insights into the importance of cyber. I have never worked at NSA. I've never worked at cyber. I'm not a tech guy at all, but I'm a user of what cyber brings, both defense and to a lesser degree offense, particularly in the last 10 years. So I have a great deal of experience in it, none of which really I can share with you, but I can tell you that this is a realm that the U.S. is way out in front on, but that's something that doesn't last forever unless you stay on top of it. And I believe that national defense is too important to be left to the federal government alone, and I think most of the good ideas come out of the private sector and universities, and I think that's always been the case. In any event, again, I have to tell you, these are my personal views. I've already said that. From the U.S. military perspective, cyber domain is unique for a lot of different reasons. In contrast to, say, operations on land, sea, or air, cyber domain is not geographically or politically or ideologically bound in any way. Many of the actors who operate in the cyber realm have no clear political, ideological, geographical identifier, nor are they in most cases, or in many cases, state players. They're individual effort type guys and gals, sometimes working literally on their own, sometimes working within, say, small terrorist networks, as an example, and sometimes working for nation states, and you know who they are. U.S. national interests are clearly linked to the domain of cyber. Economically, society, and infrastructure, all of this are increasingly dependent, and I would say probably in today's world totally dependent on what goes on in cyberspace. You can't do anything in the modern world that it doesn't go through computers, it doesn't go through databases, it doesn't go through the cyber realm. It's become the new frontier for technological advances, for global trade, and it's important for things like free speech, new social networks that are increasingly influencing domestic as well as international politics. And you know, I don't have to tell you this, that something that happens in one part of the world is even fast. We used to say the CNN effect took about an hour for something that happened in some out-of-the-way part of the world to get on the front page or on the screen. Today it takes seconds. People are reporting directly from the event. Seconds later, it's on the internet. Banking, energy, transportation, communication, and all of the U.S. military networks ride on this very, very critical infrastructure. And that reliance makes us more vulnerable to disruption or exploitation, whether from an individual hacktivist, as they're called, that's hacking in with a grudge, or foreign intelligence nation states seeking to exploit our sensitive national security and economic data. The U.S. government defines these cyber threats in two ways: cyber attacks and cyber espionage. These threats are both virtual in that they emanate from the virtual world, but they can have very, very real consequences in our physical world, like cyber attack against our electrical grid, as an example, or against the air traffic control system, that at any one time in the skies over America there are 10,000 airplanes flying, all of them under the control of the FAA. And you can see how important it is that that system be protected. Just last week, it was referenced a few minutes ago, the director of the FBI said that cyber attacks are surpassing terrorism as the major domestic threat facing the United States. And like terrorism, cybersecurity is one of those issues that can blur the lines between law enforcement, homeland security, and homeland defense. In fact, one of the issues now being debated on Capitol Hill, because you have laws protecting a lot of things and laws that put military and law enforcement into specific lanes, and cyber completely negates those separate lanes, and the Congress, our lawmakers, are trying to come to grips with that now. Our government has put a lot of thought into defining the appropriate roles for all of the agency involved in various aspects of cybersecurity. As a combatant commander, I am responsible ultimately for the securing the DoD computer networks in my command and defend against cyber as it comes up through my section of the world, which is Latin America, the Caribbean. Last year, we established at Southcom a joint cyber center. This center coordinates and integrates cyberspace defensive operations across numerous platforms and interfaces. And obviously, we work within the U.S. military cyber defense system, NSA, Pentagon, and then the worldwide combatant commander networks. This is yet another way we help ensure the southern approaches to the United States remain secure, but in this realm, it's becoming increasingly difficult, because as good as we are, our opponents are getting pretty good every day. Public and private partnerships between the government, military, academia, and the private sector are critical to solving many of today's problems. I would offer the private sector and universities are probably even more critical than any effort that the government is putting forward, just because of the intellectual capacity that exists out here and can devote time and effort to research. Ultimately, cyberspace is a global domain. There is no single organization, agency, institution, or country that can secure this domain by itself. In the end, it's going to take all of us to do that. All governments, or good, well-meaning governments throughout the world, working together to defend our nation's borders. And it's interesting, just today, Reuters had an article done by David Alexander about this issue, and this pertains to the Department of Defense, but as of today, the Department of Defense has instituted new rules that will require any defense contractor, that is any contractor, and there are tens of thousands of them, big and small, that does business with the Department of Defense, to have certain protocols in place before they can start to work and do work for the Department of Defense. These new rules will require defense contractors to incorporate established information security standards on all of their classified and unclassified networks, and to report any intrusions that result in loss of technical information over those networks immediately to the Department of Defense. And there are protocols, I believe, that the Department of Defense will offer these organizations in a voluntary way to help protect their information. The Department of Defense cannot force that on anyone, but can offer. At the end of the day, U.S. officials have estimated that foreign intruders have stolen terabytes of data, whatever that is, from military and defense. I do have kind of an idea, but have stolen massive amounts of information from defense contractors over the last decade, to the tune, the estimates are, of $1 trillion worth of mostly research and development. And I'll just end with this. Many countries, many businesses overseas wait for us, our companies, to do the research and development, steal it, and then a year or two later, it's remarkable that an airplane begins flying and is being sold on the world market that looks remarkably like something the United States is just rolling out, or something the French or something the Swedes have just rolled out. So let it go with that, and I guess open for questions. Or
I just want to say thank you so much, because obviously there's a need. We're sort of proud that USF has taken the time to put forth the effort to bring something before the legislature in 2014. We're there to support you, and Provost Wilcox, we say thank you for your presentation, and General Kelly, yours too. I think we could go on. Probably this would need a whole extra hour or two, because we're all sort of aware of this now. But I think that right now you have actually outlined the language, the center. You're ready to go with it. We're there for you. We hope that legislators are also. And I think what we need now, though I don't know that we're going to open for questions unless there's something very urgent that you'd like to ask, I would like to, at this time, entertain a motion to approve the Florida Center for Cybersecurity report, the report. You got that? Any questions, discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Sir, thank you very much for coming and taking the time. I really do appreciate it. Judy, I didn't really want to cut you all off, but I think we all have a lot of questions, so after you get it approved, come back to us. We'll do a whole session on that. Is that okay?
Those guys are like this.
Okay, fine, good. And right now, I'd like to turn to another issue that we have. It's the State University System Educational Sites Inventory. As you all recall, members of our committee in November 2011 the Board of Governors amended Regulation 8.009, educational sites, to update the site, the processes for creating, terminating, reclassifying the educational sites. The board staff was directed to create an updated inventory of existing educational sites for the main purpose of grandfathering in the pre-existing sites and to serve as a starting point from which to manage educational sites for the future. Working with the university contacts, a draft inventory has been compiled, and a comprehensive educational site inventory is still being developed that will include those sites that require Board of Governors approval and sites which require only university-level approval. The educational site inventory really is just being presented today as information, as an information item, because the existing sites have already been approved, as you know. And at this time, Jan, if you would just talk briefly about this whole issue, which is rather important. I'm sure all university presidents will be listening, and then we'll open for comments on your presentation.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to cut short this PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to start out by saying that this may be one of these technical board items that may not grab everyone's attention, but I have staff in my office doing backflips over this. It's been years and years in the process. Richard Stevens, my Director of Academic Affairs, has really labored on this. Chris Kinsley's in Facilities, who works with Tim, has been part of this. So we're very excited to have this as one of the tools that we can use for strategic planning. Okay. This Ed Sites typology was born of Regulation 8.009, and it focuses on locations that provide instruction or research. And other sites exist that are not included in the typology, but the database being created as an inventory will also capture those locations. And so we have Type 1, Type 2, Type 3 campuses, special purpose, instructional site, and special purpose site. There are different classifications. Very briefly, they kind of revolve around mainly student FTE, the number of degree programs offered, the level of research, and the level of student support services available at the site. And there are different cutoff points that you can see on the slide. Okay. The remaining types of ed sites, other than these type 1, 2, 3 campuses that I just flip through real quickly, that require Board of Governors approval, is the Special Purpose Center. And these vary widely. They either have primarily a research or a public service function. College credit courses are often offered at these sites, but it's usually in support of students who are engaged in research at these sites so that they can maintain progress toward their degrees. In some cases, we also use these special purpose centers to support distance education students who need access to labs or proctored testing services. In addition, some have been used for cooperative degree programs with another university or college. And this is the fun part, the pictures. The following slides, I'm going to flip through these really quickly because we get a lot of questions about, well, how many Type 1 institutions are there, and what do they look like? There are really no typical examples of a Type 2 or a Type 3 campus. We have 2 Type 1 campuses, and they have a lot of similarity in the system. USF St. Pete campus is a Type 1 campus, It has 2,370 funded student FTEs. That was the 2012-13, and it's expected to grow to more than 3,000 by 2017. Florida FIU's Biscayne Bay is also a Type 1 campus in the system, which has got an estimated FTE that exceeds 2,800. Type 2 campus, an example of that is USF's Rosen College of Hospitality. Again, there's only 2 in the system, and this campus, USF's campus here, is rather unique because it has a singular one academic focus. UCF. Is that what I said? I'm sorry.
On to the next slide,
Yeah,
please.
let's skip through that one real quick here. Let's go to Type 3. I do want to say the other Type 2 campus is FAU's Davie campus. I don't want to leave them out. And that's integrated with the Broward College campus. Type 3, FSU's Panama City campus. It's currently below the 1,000 FTE threshold, but there's been significant investment in facilities, and so FSU has been taking steps to ensure that this campus is used to capacity by creating a College of Applied Studies with programs that are unique to this location. Okay, Special Purpose Center. Most of our Special Purpose Centers are part of UF's IFAS network. And these are research sites which span the entire state. Finally, the typology in the Regulation 8.009 includes instructional sites that provide on-site college credit course offerings to employees of businesses and government entities, and special purpose sites that don't lead to a college degree. So there are, as you can see, there are very defined categories by which we can classify these different sites. What's important about this is the fact that in our database that we've created, it's modeled after our academic degree program inventory database. And so we can link this new EdSites database with that one and other databases that make up the State University Data System, or affectionately called SUDS. So we have a better handle on what's being offered where in terms of strategic planning for the system. I'm going to stop at this point. There's one slide here that gives you sort of the locations of the different Type 1, 2, 3 campuses. It doesn't list all the special purpose centers and sites on this. But as you can see, we do a lot throughout the state of Florida. And to capture all of the activity is a bit of a heavy lift, which is why the staff in the office are so delighted that we finally put this thing together. I also want to thank the universities for their staff for working with us to go over back and forth to make sure that the information that we have is accurate. It takes time to build these tools. So thank you, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay.
Is this on?
Yeah, you talk,
It'll come on.
Within the context of strategic planning, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. Within the context of strategic planning, I think some of us are struck by the fact that these are physical locations. So I have a couple of questions to ask. One, are these locations leased, or does the State University system own them?
Most of them, it depends on what the classification is, Governor Morton. Type 1, 2, 3 campuses are owned, and I skipped through this presentation really fast, but typically toward the end of that presentation, the sites, the special purpose sites, they're often temporary, and they can be leased. And the ones at the beginning were more permanent. And on our website, on Regulation 8.009, it lists very clearly which ones are permanent and which ones are leased. If you like, I can send you this PowerPoint with the notes.
That's okay. Again, within the context of strategic planning, to the extent they're physical locations, understanding their specific or special purpose operations, do we look at, or are we looking at them on a regular basis to determine what role IT and online learning can play in consolidating or reducing the size of that, if it's appropriate? Do we overlay that every year to take a look at what may be done more effectively or efficiently using IT and online learning?
The short answer to this is that we are capturing IT courses and degree programs, although there are fewer of those, by adding elements in our databases so that we can tease out how much is online and how much isn't. Have we looked at this to say, gee, we ought to be switching from face-to-face or hybrid to online and doing that sort of strategic direction? No, not necessarily, although the post-secondary online task force, I'm assuming that's one of the things that they're probably entertaining. Joe, is that right?
Jan, it's my understanding, though, that your presentation today is really just to tell us about this inventory. This process has been approved, but maybe it is something we want to look into in the future, since we only have 2,000 FTEs at one place and 3 at another and so forth. So, Jan, maybe it's something for the future we want to, in our committee, looked into more than just the fact that this is an inventory. I think
Right.
the inventory is very important, but it does feed into that whole strategic plan, the alignment and so forth.
It's about 6 or 7% of the total FTE right now in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in terms of strategic direction, yes, it should be incredibly useful going forward in the future. We're not quite finished building it, but we're darn close.
Okay, so then we'll hear from you over the next couple of meetings, I hope. Is there anyone else that has a question regarding this? And as long as you're standing up there, why don't we consider the members of this committee in September of 2013 began a dialogue with regard to strategic plan alignment. One of the components was to review the key metrics to determine whether strategic plan goals would be met on those particular metrics. And as we've all discussed, over the 11 metrics under consideration, 4 of them are below projected levels and need further consideration about whether these goals should be maintained or even reduced. Staff has analyzed the data relative to these metrics and is recommending that only 1 of the 4 of the metrics be maintained, while the other 3 metrics be lowered. Today, we'll discuss the staff recommendations about these metrics and work towards a decision concerning maintaining or reducing the goals of the board's 2025 strategic plan. Then at our next Board of Governors meeting in January, we'll circle back to this issue and vote to approve recommendations to either maintain or reduce the goals after we've had some time to consider the information that we're going to be getting today. So at this time, Jan, if you want to go over this, I'd appreciate it, as with the committee.
Okay. He's bringing up the PowerPoint on the screen. There we are. We've been looking at the board strategic plan. The strategic plan that goes out to 2025 has 28 goals. Some of them are very quantitative. And at a board meeting, I think it was the March board meeting, this board decided to do periodic 5-year checks to see where we are on our trajectory. And so in 2014 and again in 2019, we need to look at where we are in these metrics and decide if we're on course, and if we're not, what should we do about it, if anything? So you'll see in red on this chart There are 4 metrics where we're not on, we haven't maintained our trajectory. Baccalaureate degree production, total R&D expenditures, graduate degree production, and STEM graduate degree production, and 3 of these relate to graduate education. This is how far we're off trajectory. 8% on baccalaureate degree production, and frankly, I'm really not very worried about that. And I'm not worried about that because of several factors. One, our universities we're seeing improvements in the university work plans and in the data that we have in the accountability report. We're graduating more students that we have. So we're making improvements on throughput. Also, UF Online will be graduating more students in baccalaureate degree programs. Florida Poly has yet to contribute, but they'll be ramping up. And as we just heard earlier, the Florida College System, while small, is also contributing baccalaureate degrees. So 8% off trajectory, I'm not that concerned. I think we'll make it up. These other metrics, I think, are a little more problematic. And so the purpose of this presentation is an information item. It's to hopefully get feedback from you, from the Strategic Planning Committee, so that staff can respond to any further questions you may have, and then we can circle back in January and ask you to approve staff recommendations if you see fit to do so on what we recommend to do to adjust. I will say this, in my experience with other states, strategic plans are living documents, and you do your best thinking and your best based on the best data you've got. But making adjustments periodically may be necessary in order to maintain credibility in the plan. If the plan is seriously off track and there's no possibility you're going to be able to hit those targets, then the question becomes, whether or not those are realistic targets.
On the other hand, your comments are, should we reduce them or maintain them? How about if we strengthen them and keep them all? And we spent a lot of time, Jan, building metrics, and because we're not meeting them right now, maybe we ought to address those issues as to how come.
And that's staff recommendations on some of these are to maintain the metrics and just redirect the resources or beef up the resources to get there. Here's where we are in baccalaureate degree production. As you can see on that chart, the dotted line is the 90,000 up at the top. I don't have a laser pointer, so I can't point. But if you see that thick blue line, we're not that far off. Again, so staff recommends maintaining the 2025 goal of producing 90,000 baccalaureate degrees a year for the system. We think that's achievable. Now, with total R&D expenditures, we're down by let me rephrase that. We're off trajectory by 14%. And this is what that looks like. At the time when the strategic plan, the 2025 strategic plan goals were established, $1.68 billion in research and development expenditures, were being reported by the universities. So that meant that in the system strategic plan, we should have been able to reach $3.25 billion, which is nearly doubling the R&D by 2025. And that goal was based on about an average $100 million a year growth per year. Given the fact that we have gone through this economic downturn and now universities are facing the effects of sequestration, and there will be an info brief coming to this board in January on how we've calculated what that effect will be, we think that that goal is probably unlikely to be met. So staff recommendations is to adjust the goal to a more realistic $2.75 billion based on 75 million average growth per year. That's still pretty aggressive. That's a lot of growth in R&D, but in light of sequestration, in light of what we've just been through in terms of the economic recession, we felt that this was a little more realistic. Okay, 2 more degree goals, graduate degree production. Right now, we're off trajectory about 20%. And that's what that looks like. Our goal was 40,000, and if we maintain the trajectory we're on, we'll be around 32,000, just under that, which is about 8,000 fewer graduate degrees per year than we had estimated. The staff recommendation is to leave the graduate degree production goal at $40,000, but estimating the costs associated with lifting up production to meet the goal. And my last slide in this presentation are those costs. We calculated those costs in terms of what it would be over the life of the plan to 2025, as well as annually to reach those goals. We also broke this out by STEM and non-STEM because there are different costs with the programs. In STEM graduate degree production, we're down even further, 44% off trajectory. And staff, this is what it looks like. We're only going to get to about half of what the strategic plan goal was.
Dan, are these supply statements or demand statements?
These are supply statements. And you'll hear about the gap analysis work tomorrow, but that's at the baccalaureate level. And we haven't done the heavy lifting that's involved with doing this graduate level gap analysis, and that's something we'll get to tomorrow. It's a critical piece of this. Okay. Using the SUS expenditure analysis, staff has calculated that the cost of a STEM master's degree to be around $25,500. We multiply that figure by the projected gap in STEM production between the historical trend and the 2025 goal, and we got an approximation of what it would cost to get there, an investment of about $153 million over the life of the plan. If we look at what the gap is in non-STEM, it's not as great. There's about a 2,000 FTE gap, and the additional investment would be about $39 million to reach the goal. Staff also recommends maintaining the graduate degree production goal. And this is what the costs look like when you break it down. Annual investment of approximately $12.75 million for STEM and $3.25 million for non-STEM to reach the goals. One of the things that we talked about in the Access and Attainment Commission, and I don't want to steal tomorrow's thunder because this is my chair's initiative that we have been shepherding for a year and a half, but if the Florida college system is growing baccalaureate degrees in certain areas, does it make sense for us to grow graduate degrees in high demand areas and to shift the mix? Is that something we need to consider? Are there other ways we can get efficiencies that will equal this $12.75 million a year? E-procurement. Are there other ways we can go about doing this? And those are conversations I think we need to have as a system. But I think it's also important to get our arms around where we are on the strategic plan goals, where we are off trajectory, and where we may need to make some adjustments. So these are staff recommendations, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions that we could raise and further analysis staff can do. So I await your questions and input.
Yes, please.
The headline on the Chronicle that I just got is STEM, is reality or myth. You know, it's about whether or not there's really a demand for the STEM degrees we're producing. And in the article it talks about if you're a baccalaureate degree holder in biology today in the United States, you have a hard time getting a job. You can go get a graduate. If you get a graduate degree, you got an opportunity, and you might have been better off getting an AA degree in some area in the sciences that would have gotten you a certification or gotten you. But if you're just a baccalaureate degree holder, it's a stepping stone to something further, but not necessarily a stepping stone right then to a job. So I guess one of the things I'm interested in is that, are there just not students who want to get graduate degrees, or do we not have the programs to offer the students? Because we're producing a lot of STEM majors right now. I mean, STEM degree majors right now. Do we just not have the graduate programs for them, or what's happening to them?
She says it's a supply thing, so we don't have the capacity, that's what this says. We don't have the capacity in our strategic plan to produce this.
We don't at the school level or the student level.
School level. Demand would be students. I asked the question, she said it's supply, therefore it's not there, which is the demand.
So do we need to be asking our universities to have more master's degrees and PhD degrees in order for this to happen?
And that's one of our that's one of the metrics that we've got in the work plans, is to grow graduate degrees in targeted areas of emphasis. I think that you're right that a lot of these baccalaureate degrees are pathways to a graduate degree in the area. And we have not done the gap analysis at the graduate level yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a piece of this, I think, that we have to look forward to. But in terms of reaching these strategic plan goals, we're not on track.
This is an important issue, I think.
Yeah.
We concluded as a system that we need this many STEM graduate programs. Then we have to go find a way to put the capacity in place.
I'm sorry, Governor Lautenbach, I can't hear you.
Our strategic plan called out that we needed this many graduate STEM degrees to meet the needs of our state, and we're short on capacity. So we got to find the funds to go put the capacity.
I don't know if you can hear me, this microphone's being a little glitchy. I think one of the things that we're going to be looking at in that STEM/health committee that we've just established here in the board is exactly that sort of more detailed analysis that's needed here. That committee, one of the first things on the plate is to do an environmental scan. And an environmental scan will include both the supply and the needs, including evolving and emerging needs, which is beyond just what's existing now. And that has to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted, the cost that you're including is just the cost to put a student through the system, but it doesn't include any facilities or any new product, new capital.
This is just E&G.
We're doubling in some cases these capacities. Without the facilities, you're not going to get there unless you do it all online, and a lot of this stuff you might not be able to do that way. So, I think there's a deeper question here, and really in cost, because right now we don't have any.
Judy, do you have a question? Did you have a question? Okay. We can't hear you. Yes. The system isn't working, so we have to, speak up.
The state of Florida has one of the highest level of Pell Grant recipients because we have large universities with very high Pell Grants. When the students finish their STEM undergraduate degree, many of them cannot afford to go back, and they have enough money until they work some of this off. And we do give out graduate stipends for students who go to school, but it's mainly at the doctoral level rather than at the master's level. So I think there is that time gap in the kind of students that we have.
John, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a reminder that everybody here knows that when the state, in combination of tuition and state support, is 30% below the national average, it's going to be hard to hit some of these numbers absent influx of some new money. And I think if you do take a look at the outputs based on the dollars spent, universities have afforded to do pretty well. But it doesn't detract from the fact that we've got higher numbers that we've got to hit. It's going to require some more money. especially in research dollars, that's labs. That's heavy.
Yeah.
As Governor Beard pointed out, those are expensive facilities to build and develop. And we just shut down construction on the campuses for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's important when we really dig into this and really understand what is the supply side of it and the demand side. So there's some really that students don't have the wherewithal, but that's a demand. So they have the capacity in place to get there. Then the question is, are people sign up for it? And we ought to parse this into those pieces so we know exactly what it's like.
Dave?
I don't know how many people saw the article in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, both talking about Georgia Tech's fully accredited master's degree in computer science, totally online for a cost of $6,600. And if they analyzed the people who applied for it and how many people applied, and the difference in the people who applied were working Americans as opposed to people that were younger. It was a fascinating dynamic to take a look at the makeup of the people who applied for that degree. Why do I mention that? Because I think Governor Beard appropriately pointed out that there may be some mix of online as well as physical facilities that are going to be needed. But I would like to suggest that we also take a look at massive open online courses, as Georgia Tech is doing, in STEM, because it does allow for significant reduction in cost. And it's just something that we should factor in. I also agree with Governor Laudenbach. I think we need to look at the demand side of the equation as much as we look at the supply side, make sure we're demand matching as opposed to just supply. Thank you.
We've been in conversations, our staff has been, with the folks at Georgia Tech, including, I think, Dr. Nelson Baker. And what they're telling us is that they need about 10,000 students, enrollees, to make this work. And about 350 of them are Georgians, 350 about from California. So, and they're just getting started. But I think Provost Wartzog, you have some information too on that Georgia Tech program.
Yes, one of the things that certainly helped them is AT&T gave them $2 million to charge.
I see that.
And their numbers are, they're looking at what it costs them for the first students in the program, and it's about $15,300 per student, which means that they're coming up short about $9,000 per student initially. If they get to 10,000 students, their cost per student will be about $5,000, and they're charging $6,700. So at 10,000 students, they will be having a positive cash
flow. But okay, so I can take advantage of technology here and speak a little bit softer. With the 10,000 students and the $5,000 cost, but I think one thing we need to recognize is across every university across the United States, the latest data from the National Science Foundation is that they awarded 18,400 degrees, master's degrees in computer science. So in order to reach the magnitude for Georgia State to be breaking even, they're going to have to award an equivalent number to which would be half of the total number of degrees awarded by every other university, public and private, in the United States on an annual basis. So it's very ambitious, but it has some exceedingly large caveats.
Any other questions? Or else in January, I think, Jan, we're going to reiterate a lot of this between now and then. And unless you have a final comment on it, we'll move on.
Just a question that, overall, does the committee think that the staff recommendations, we put those out there sort of as our best thinking, but would you like us to develop alternate scenarios? I'm quite not sure.
More information. Right.
Can I ask a question too? This is a question and somewhat elementary. For graduate degrees, how much of the cost of a graduate degree is tuition versus state funding?
Tim, did you hear that question?
No.
How much of the cost of a graduate degree is tuition versus state funding? Do you have that
Breakdown,
exact?
percentage breakdown. How much of a graduate degree is tuition versus state funding? Maybe it's not such an elementary question. The reason I asked the question is the comment about that President Delaney made about the needing more money. You know, what's the fixed cost of a the allocation of fixed cost for a graduate degree versus the variable cost of producing a degree? How much money do you need, and how much of it is tuition versus state funding? I think that's an important part of the question.
It all varies. I mean,
I'm sure it is by program.
Well, and then for many of the programs, you literally have to pay the tuition for the graduate student. So you've got a much higher cost going in than just the traditional formula. And that's not true of all of the degrees that are offered, but it is particularly so in the sciences.
And that would be, I think, it would be important to know probably even sort of by program, you know, because that is, I mean, if you're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what that gap is or what the delta is, that's a part of the supply and demand question, so.
You need to ask as well whether there is any unused state funding, or what, my point is, if there's no money for growth at the graduate level or at the undergraduate level, then there is no new state money coming in per student.
Right.
You're cannibalizing other programs to do whatever you do.
Yeah, we had, this is an information item, and we had in the strategic plan realignment process to look at these in 2014. It sounds like it's going to take us more than January to come back to you with the information you need.
But maybe you'll give us periodic updates as to what you're finding, and you've heard some of the questions. Thank you.
Jan, as you prepare the R&D recommendation, it would help to know, I know the slide 9 where you had the graph, I'm assuming the slope has changed in order to accommodate the sequestration.
But if the slope is flatter, and not only is the dollar amount, you know, your dollar amount is lower that you're starting with, but the slope itself is flatter.
But it seems like there's a constant slope, whereas we may be changing the way our universities are working with R&D with new emphasis. So it's hard for me to just assume that a constant slope will take us somewhere. It might need a little bit more definition.
We looked at what the R&D was, and I don't have that slide.
It's off about a third.
It may be the next slide on that as a back pocket slide. And it just has been jumping all over the place from 100 and some million to 19 to 200 and some. I mean, the numbers have been incredibly variable over the last 7 or 8 years. So to plot out something consistent is probably unrealistic.
So being realistic, are we going to see this in January? Probably not. Maybe we need it to the next board meeting because, you know, you heard a lot of the questions.
Right. It's going to take a while to get
and so
the
I
answers.
think, but it's some way down the road, we need to hear about it. Yes, Wayne?
Governor Frost, as much as we can get information by January, even if it's just a little bit, it
Is it better?
would really be helpful to us.
Okay.
We're looking at an incredible amount of funding for research facilities, for, you know, STEM degrees. Oh, I'm back again. On and on. And so we have to make further recommendations to the legislature, and if we're not going to be able to turn out our STEM graduates, if we're not going to be able to attract the research dollars, then it really becomes a return on investment for the legislature to make a determination of what makes sense. So I know it's a giant lift, and we have a small staff in our Board of Governors offices as it is, but anything that we could get, Jan, would be helpful as we look forward and try to.
Okay, Jan, you're on for the January meeting. It's already decided. We have a fabulous staff up in Tallahassee. You know, we picked a new chancellor. You know, we could do that. Now that's all finished. Jan, you're on for next January. End of conversation. You'll give us some information. But, you know, the members, as part of the strategic plan alignment project, the Board of Governors staff was directed to update, in addition to other things, the categories and list of academic programs of strategic emphasis. following a similar methodology with the one used in 2008. Staff reviewed reports and data produced by the key economic and workforce development organizations in the state, and it also reviewed related national reports. Based on these sources, the categories associated with the programs of strategic emphasis have been updated, and degree programs offered by the state universities have been reclassified in alignment with the new categories. The updated programs of strategic emphasis is being presented today for approval and will go into effect for 2014-2015 academic year. And I'd like to, at this time, ask the Associate Vice Chancellor, Ari Limon, if you want to do a brief presentation, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I only have 4 slides, so in the interest of time, I'll go through them as quickly as possible. The programs of strategic emphasis is a subset of the degree programs offered within the state university system, and they exist as one of several tools for aligning the degree production goals of the state university system with the economic and workforce needs of Florida. The programs of strategic emphasis was last updated in 2008, so we feel like it's time to update them again. I won't read this slide to you, but you'll see what the process is intended to do, and as well as what it's not intended to do, certainly not to undermine the value of other degree programs. There is a 3-step methodology for creating the list of programs of strategic emphasis. As in the past updates to the programs of strategic emphasis, we analyzed reports. We analyzed 13 reports at the state level from entities such as Enterprise Florida, Workforce Florida, the Council of 100, the Florida Center for Nursing, and so on, as well as 6 national reports that had to do with workforce. So that was the first thing that we did, and we culled out from those reports themes or actual areas of workforce areas that were identified from those reports. So step 2 of the process was merging and evaluating the areas of interest and emphasis from those reports to determine appropriate broad academic program categories that aligned with reports. So from the reports, we developed categories. And then step 3 of the process is to identify the specific academic degree programs and program clusters that should be included under the broad program categories. And we do this in our standard methodology of classifying according to the federal classification called the SIP classification, Classification of Instructional Programs. This slide and the next slide, which will be my last slide, focus on the substantive changes recommended in the revising the programs of strategic emphasis. Based upon the review of the key council reports and the national reports, we were recommending that the current broad program categories be revised and renamed to better demonstrate alignment with recommendations in the reports and the data. Very quickly, we're recommending a reduction from 6 broad categories to 5 categories, the replacement of 1 category with a new category, and the renaming of 4 categories. So you see the renaming in categories 1 and 2, as well as in category 5 to better reflect workforce and economic development. You see the replacement of the category number 3 in the current from economic development regional workforce demand to the gap analysis programs that were identified by the board's Access and Attainment Commission. We're using that as a tool to identify the programs of strategic emphasis. You're seeing then some name changes, and you're seeing the elimination of the critical needs, security, and emergency services as a category.
The substantive changes, therefore, are these. All education programs in the 13 SIP classification of instructional program family leading to classroom teacher preparation are included in the programs of strategic emphasis, as well as student counseling, which was previously not in the programs of strategic emphasis, but we believe that it's important for K-12 success. We are recommending all health-related programs in the 51 classification of instructional program family to be included in the programs of strategic emphasis. We make that recommendation based on the demand for healthcare and healthcare support services increasing due to demographic changes and changes in state and federal policy. Once again, we're recommending the replacement of local workforce demand by the statewide gap analysis conducted by the Access to Educational Attainment Commission. And finally, we are recommending at the bottom of this slide the elimination of security and emergency preparedness. It doesn't mean that all of those programs would no longer be on the list of programs of strategic emphasis. We would take those STEM-related programs, such as forensic sciences, cybersecurity, and we would move them over to the STEM category. Madam Chair, those are the recommendations of staff for the programs of strategic emphasis.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments?
Okay.
Yes.
Just a quick question, and this is more just on when it says all health-related programs, and then it says previously limited to healthcare practitioners. What are the programs outside of healthcare? I would think healthcare practitioners is a all-encompassing. What
we have, Governor Levine, we have a wide variety of programs in the state university system that are not particularly or exactly practitioner related. For example, I'll give you one example.
Biology or
healthcare records administration.
Okay,
would
all right.
be a good one. And then there's a whole subcategory of those that are not strictly practitioner related.
That helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comment?
Yes.
Question? Yes?
Yeah, it is.
Dr. Lamont, as we went from globalization to global competitiveness, are there programs that are now considered no longer strategically important?
Yes, there are. We're recommending some clusters of programs that are no longer to be included in the programs of strategic emphasis based strictly on the fact that we were not able to find support for them in any of the 19 state or national reports. Those included anthropology and political science.
Any other comments, questions, discussion? I'd like to at this time then entertain a motion to approve the updated programs of strategic emphasis. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
At this time, the members of our committee during the university work plan presentation in June of 2013, we had asked the University of South Florida to return to the Board of Governors again to address the issue of mission setting at its regional institutions, USF St. Petersburg and USF Saratoga Manatee. University of South Florida representatives will provide information with regard to how missions are established and the extent to which mission setting is a dialogue between the USF Tampa campuses and the USF Board of Trustees and the regional institutions. And at this time, I want to recognize both the president and the provost if they have some comments to make on it.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to talk about the unique legislatively directed structure of the University of South Florida and how it helps contribute to the state university system's goals and priority. I also want to recognize the 10 members of our Board of Trustees
who came this morning. Some had to leave, but I would like the board members to rise as I call your name. Chair John Ramil was here this morning. Vice Chair Hal Mullis, Brian Lamb, Nancy Watkins, Chris Davis, Steve Mitchell, Mark Lombardi Nelson, Stan Levy, Scott Hopes, Byron Shin, who are all here today, either this morning or now. I know we all appreciated the opportunity to get together this morning and lunch, and it was a terrific trustees seminar at the Board of Governors Summit. What I'd like to do is offer a short overview of our system, then I'll ask USF trustee Brian Lamb, who chairs USF's Academic Oversight Committee, to share a few thoughts on the Board of Trustees' involvement in each institution's mission setting. We also have with us Dr. Sophia Wisniewska. If you'd please stand, Regional Chancellor of the USF St. Petersburg, and also Dr. Arthur Guilford, Regional Chancellor of USF Sarasota Manatee, and they are available to answer questions. The USF system serves approximately 48,000 students and has an annual impact of $11.5 billion. It is made up of 3 institutions, USF in Tampa, USF St. Petersburg, and USF Sarasota Manatee. Each are separately accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, and each are funded separately in the state budget as required by state law. Details of the legal requirements are in a 2-page back front frequently asked questions document, which I believe is in front of everybody today. As a system, USF is committed to common goals of ensuring student success, engaging with the community, and fostering an innovative entrepreneurial spirit. As a system, we are stronger and more efficient, and we are greater than the sum of our parts. At the same time, our unique structure makes us well positioned to meet the many varied needs of students across the diverse 8-county Tampa Bay region, which has a population of 4.3 million people. Collectively, we are able to provide students with a menu of options for a high-quality, affordable higher education under a globally recognized brand. USF students can take classes at any USF system institution, ensuring that they are all afforded the educational opportunities to meet their individual needs. They also have the choice of making one campus their home. At the Tampa campus, students experience a 1,700 research campus that reflects Tampa's global ambitions. USF St. Petersburg and USF Sarasota Manatee are master's degree granting institutions. Each provides students with a unique small university feel and a tight-knit community of learners and researchers that drive economic development in those areas. The USF system ensures a maximized value proposition to the state by sharing key services, reducing duplication of efforts, and leveraging of each institution's strength for the benefit of the whole system. Economies of scale that the USF system provides allows the university to pass down savings to its regional institutions that would cost considerably more if procured separately. For example, maintaining the software licenses for USF accounting and HR systems costs about $1.2 million each year. system-level contract permits these licenses to be shared across all 3 campuses. They each don't have to buy their own at $1.2 million, which also eliminates the need for separate technical personnel at each campus. Another example, shared library e-resources are at a discounted aggregate cost of about $5 million each year, and they're available to students and faculty at all 3 campuses. Actually, it's 4 because we make those available to New College as well. If each campus were to contract for these services individually, the cost would be substantially higher. Certain aspects of our individual institutional missions may differ, but we work together to ensure that they contribute to the strategic vision of the USF system and the priorities of the Board of Governors, making a positive impact on our region, the state, and the world. The USF Board of Trustees, as a governing body and sole local authority for the USF system, has the responsibility of reviewing and approving those missions and plans. The board works in close conjunction with each campus throughout this process, ensuring that each part of the USF system is contributing toward the central goals and mission of the whole. This partnership is strengthened by having one member of the USF Board of Trustees serve as chair of each regional chancellor campus, each regional campus board, providing a seamless link to governance. Just this week, USF St. Petersburg began the development of a new strategic plan, a process that includes campus faculty, students, staff, and board members, as well as USF system officers and community stakeholders. The plan, upon approval by the USF Board of Trustees next summer, will guide USF St. Pete from 2015 to 2020. In a similar collaborative process, the USF Board of Trustees recently approved a strategic plan for USF Sarasota Manatee that runs through 2016. I'd like to now call on Trustee Brian Lamb to briefly elaborate on the USF Board of Trustees oversight role.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, good afternoon, Governor Frost. Thanks for the opportunity to just spend a little time with you this afternoon, Chair Colson, Vice Chair Hosseini, and to all of the Board of Governors. I want to start by really highlighting something I thought was interesting this morning when I looked at the strategic issues, the number one strategic issue as outlined in our Trustee Summit packet. The first item was accountability. And I commend our Board of Governors for highlighting that and leading with that, and I would like to open up the conversation around what we're doing as trustees around oversight and accountability. I'd like to share a couple of examples. Governor Frost, I'm going to touch on a few of the things we're doing to make sure the process to put in place missions and visions for our campus comes alive and is clear around how it aligns to our system. And then just touch on going forward and increased collaboration that you should come to expect from our university system. First, when you look at our oversight around the academic affairs, the mission setting, one of the things that's critically important is when you look at the framework that the Board of Governors has in place around our work plans, our accountability reports. It's a perfect example of how that trickles down right to our own USF system. Our Board of Trustees, even though we're in a unique legislative structure, it's not a complaint that we're in that structure. We've learned to operate in it. And I would tell you we continue to get better around leveraging that structure to find efficiencies. I think Governor Morton was spot on when you talked about the different campuses and where we can find efficiencies through academic delivery, through our facilities, and other channels for our students. And so I would tell you that the Board of Trustees takes a lot of responsibility and not allowing our legislative structure to get in the way of achieving academic success. Let me share a few specifics in terms of that oversight and accountability that I know we all share. As recently as over the last few weeks, we spent some time in our work group meetings where the trustees were present, and we visited with both our Sarasota Manatee campus and our St. Petersburg campus, which were defined earlier as kind of Type 1 and Type 3 campuses from a definition standpoint. There were concepts brought to the table to the trustees. One of them was looking at our urban campus on St. Pete and looking at our ability to look at land that may be available so that we could grow that campus in line with our strategic plan. I would tell you, I think our staff did a fantastic job of putting that proposal together. But we asked tough questions. And we ultimately didn't decide to approve or move or take action on what was presented. And we asked that team to go back and consider some other options. The same thing happened with our Sarasota Manatee campus. A well-prepared master plan that looked at how we're going to grow that campus over the next 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of thought being into that when we look at growth without forsaking quality. We absolutely have got to address that. I'm going to touch on that briefly. But we also asked them to go back and refine their thinking to make sure we put achievable plans in place, that we could track our progress, that we could absolutely improve the academic success, a higher probability of placing our students after graduation into jobs and keeping those students here in the state of Florida. That's a responsibility that our trustees take very seriously. We're holding our president accountable to that. We're holding our chancellors on our campuses accountable to that. And that's a commitment that I'm sure my other trustees share with me, and that's my responsibility as chair of our Academic Oversight Committee. One other item I'd just like to highlight around this is when you look at our alignment with the campus's the campus's mission with our USF mission, I think we've been very clear that it's okay for them to have their own identity. They are solving to achieve greatness in the communities they serve. I think our Sarasota Manatee community has been very vocal with us. They are very proud to be a part of the USF system, and in fact, they're adamant about it. And we're building that kind of relationship and trust and value proposition with both of our campuses. So I'd like to assure you that because we've got trustees that are on the campus boards, we have a very open and transparent communication with our campus boards and a clear process that we will continue to follow as we set the strategic direction and mission of these campuses. The trustees do have oversight. We do take responsibility, and we absolutely will be holding our president and our chancellors responsible and accountable for delivering on the commitments we make to our Board of Governors, to our governor, and to our entire state university system.
Thank you very much. I think you did address many of the questions, but I think we still have others. Yes.
Sure. When you roll up your numbers, there are 10 measurements now, we're going to give out performance funding. Are Sarasota and St. Petersburg in there? So they're in your numbers?
Yes, they are. The question was, are the campus's results consolidated into the system measures that, as we look at the 10 Board of Governor measures? Yes, sir, they are.
Well, that's not how we saw it. This last time, what you presented to us was separated, and that's what it got our attention. Madam President, we believe in University of South Florida. We know how much economic, impact University of South Florida has. We use that all the time with the legislators, so we know all of that. We're here. What we're trying to do is we said, look at the Tampa, look at all those results, and you use that, your other campuses, you know that it doesn't look the same. It's different. So what our question is, how can we help you? I know you have here is what's required by Florida law and what's required by SACS. All of that is changeable. If you feel, and we can help you to change the law, let's do it. If that's good for our students, that it could make those, all the retention, all the performance measurements, that it can be held and changed. Let's do it. There is no sacred cow out there that we should not touch something. And at least it should be worth trying. And look at every one of the measurement. When we looked at the measurement last time, it was a big difference between Tampa and two other, so that was I brought up that question at last meeting. And the only reason I brought it up, USF has done so much. And so maybe we should have started every meeting and said, well, you guys are doing so well, everything's so great, but, we go directly to the areas of question. And we want to be able to help you and help our system to create the synergy. What we don't want to happen, let's say graduation rate, or the STEM, what we don't want as a whole, we don't want, that area to bring down your percentages. And then that's what we are hoping that with your help, if we need to do something, if there is a law needs to be changed, and I'm not suggesting we're able to change law, at least we can suggest it. At least we can go to the legislators and to the governor and say, look, we need to make some changes here so we'll be able to change this, performance measurement. So that was why I asked those questions at the last meeting. And I am hoping, Mr. Lyman and Brian, you and I have been working together, and I am delighted your involvement with academic, because I think a lot of that has to do with academic. So whatever areas that you see that we should be able to help you with that, please let us know. I think your committee and the committee as a whole board ought to look at it, what can the Board of Governors do to help you, and we get the same result at your other campuses as we get at Tampa.
I just wanted to clarify so that I was answering the question that Governor Lautenbach had asked. The last list of accountability measures when we received our stipend for what we achieved, that did include all of the members. However, what I presented to the last board meeting was mainly Tampa.
Well, we had the others too. Right?
Yes.
But if they aren't continuing the next 10 measurements, then they won't qualify for performance funding.
What I believe we were asked is to make sure that we rolled everything up into one from the Board of Governors.
Well, how would you not do that? Because otherwise they would just get lost. All of their results would never be reflected anywhere, right?
And so what we did once we received our amount from the last merit funding or performance funding, we knew exactly which of the institutions had contributed to the success, and that proportion will be given when we receive it. It will be given to them. I mean, it is complicated with the different budgets.
I think that's fair to Tampa. It brings down your performance.
I think it's a very fair question, and that's a perfect example that when we sit down with our new chancellor at our St. Petersburg campus, when we look at that strategic plan, that it's not okay to set growth performance goals that don't allow us to see an equal or even more improvement around the student success measures. So I think what you're going to see from us is continued improvement. I'd just like to share an example. When you look at graduation rates at our St. Petersburg campus today, and you look back 12, 24, 36 months, you're going to see a trajectory of improvement that, when sustained, could put them at the same level that the University of South Florida Tampa campus is. And that trajectory, we feel like we've got the right operating rhythms in place to continue that. Governor Hosseini, I think you're asking the right question. It's the same question we're asking at the trustee level. I would tell you, I'm using that example around our St. Pete campus because the time is now for us to get that right and continue to improve the performance of those key metrics. So it's not okay in any of our businesses to have segments of our business underperform. in any of our businesses to underperform. So we're going to address that.
Brian, one of the things, you all used to have 3 campuses, branch campuses. Now you have 2. What I don't want you to end up with is 1 or 0, because because that means we will have a 13th or 14th university, and that's one of the things we're going to hear from the Access Commission tomorrow. Is we don't think we need any more universities in this state right now. So I would just urge you to do, and this is not something I'm making up, this is things I hear around the halls of Tallahassee. Sure. Yep. So I would just urge you to do whatever is necessary to relieve the local pressure on people feeling they need to have their own hometown university, which means a decade from now, their own football team, their own medical school, their own. We don't need that. I would just urge you to put that on the list of things that we need to worry about.
Did you have a vision of increasing enrollment in these locations? Short-term, long-term?
We do.
Which is what?
I think you've seen numbers in the past, and I'll let our president comment on that, around what those enrollment growth numbers look like. I think what you're going to see is a heavier balance around also the student success measures to achieve that growth.
There is capacity at the USF St. Pete and the USF Sarasota Manatee to have more students, both online and face-to-face on campus. So there is capacity, and that is something that we work together with the number of applicants to make sure if some are not able to attend USF Tampa, they are referred to USF Sarasota or USF St. Petersburg.
But the standards are the same that you're looking for. The standard is the same that you're looking for in terms of the student that you're asking.
The standard of performance is the same. The
admission of the student?
The standards of admissions are a little different.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something to look at too in the future. I don't know. Any other comments or questions? We thank you for your comments and for bringing half of your Board of Trustees to our summit this morning. I mean, that was wonderful. And we see that you all work together, that's for sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. Do you have any other comment to make? Or
The one thing I wanted to say is I'd like to redirect that thank you. I think our Board of Trustees and our university owes our Board of Governors a tremendous amount of gratitude. You've been very supportive. You've held us accountable and asked us tough questions. I think that's made us better. And we're well positioned to go into the next year and the future because the collaborative relationship we have and the commitment we're making to you today, you'll see that continue. You'll see us continue to reach out from time to time, exchange ideas, best practices to elevate the University of South Florida to the next level. So I simply just want to say thank you for that partnership, for the support.
Well, as you heard, we're here to help you, and you have to address those issues to us. If we can help, we're going to try.
Thank you. And I do want to say, in terms of how it works for students, it works really well because there's so many that go to various, they do take courses around.
Good, great. We have one more point in our committee to address, and it has to do with our preeminent state research university benchmark plan, and that's an action item for us, as you know. And in 2013, the legislature passed, and the governor approved Senate Bill 1076, codified as Chapter 2013-27, Laws of Florida, which included the creation of the Preeminent State Research Universities program. On June 10th, 2013, the board designated the University of Florida and Florida State University as the only universities meeting the requirements that we had established. The legislation required each designated university to submit to the board for approval a 5-year benchmark plan for national excellence. Upon approval of each university's plan, the legislation requires the board to award to each university $15 million in funds that were included in the institution's lump sum appropriation for 2013-2014 General Appropriations Act that were provided for this purpose. Upon the universities meeting the benchmark plan goals annually, the board will award an amount specified in the GAA throughout the 5-year period. The university plans are in your meeting materials, which I'm sure you've all read through and we've heard about, and you have had the opportunity to read them carefully, I hope. And at this time, I will entertain any questions that you might have of either one of the universities and ask any questions, and then I'd like a motion to approve these plans, benchmark plans. Do we have any questions that we would like to ask? Are you going to do a presentation? I don't have it. No? In my notes. I think they've been presenting. Are you going to be presenting anything, or do you want to make a comment before we... That's what I thought. Okay, I was told. We're running late. Okay, but...
I'll move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We don't want to cut you off, but if you really want to say something, Bernie, we're here.
We feel very gratified to be cut off.
Okay. You're on.
15 million worth.
You got the number.
Okay.
All
Mr.
done?
Chairman, we're all finished.
Okay,
Almost on time.
trustee nominating.